ago, Cale Yarborough personified what it meant to be a success in a sport still tied to its roots. He grew up as rural South could be, walking barefoot to school through tobacco fields outside Sardis, South Carolina, in the shadow of the Darlington Speedway. A town with fewer people in it than a marching band. Although he won more than $5 million in his career, his life contains just enough elements of the Old South that he and the drivers of his generation became known outside the region as the good old boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dale Earnhardt.
Once so broke, he checked vending machines and payphones for loose change. Forbes now ranks Dale Earnhardt as the 8th highest paid athlete in all of sports with a last year's income of $19 million. You can't call NASCAR's finest the good old boys anymore. Yarborough, Earnhardt, two men at either end of the explosion that has made NASCAR a national phenomenon. It's come with a price.
Things that you used to could enjoy doing, a simple dinner, or simple, like to go to the grocery store, you know, and do a little shopping or whatever, you can't do.
The top NASCAR drivers today can hardly go to a restaurant. They're in demand. I think it was Jeff Burton said the other day on television, gee, I wouldn't want to be Jeff Gordon. And Jeff Gordon in his world is almost in the same situation that a Michael Jordan is.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's an ironic equation in time. The time you spend with the media, sponsors, and fans multiplies the money you can spend, but leaves you no time to do what you once would have done for free.
If it paid $1 to win the race or it didn't pay anything, you'd race just as hard.
In fact, when I first started, we didn't run for any money. We would just go down and a bunch of us get together and run. And of course, sometimes they would take up donations and in the grandstand and divide it out that way.
You make a living at this? No, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. It's a source of livelihood.
Well, how do you make a living?
You can forgive Tommy Thompson if his crystal ball was a little cloudy. In 1952, there was no way anyone could have foreseen how big the sport he called a hobby would become.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
Air Force One doesn't usually make house calls, but on Independence Day, 1984, it did. Ronald Reagan was there at the incredible 200th victory of the man NASCAR calls the King.
That was really exciting. A president had not been to Daytona Beach, much less to a racetrack. So we felt that was just a wonderful thing to happen.
What changed the face of NASCAR? What gave it the power to bring the most powerful man in the world to Daytona Beach?
Today you'll see the world's fastest late model stock cars whizzing through these turns at speeds of 160 miles an hour on ABC's Wide World of Sports.
It's the story of how television fell in love with NASCAR.
The 50 is brought to you by Goodyear, #1 in tires, and by the all-new Wide Track Grand Prix by Pontiac. Wider is better.
I'm so happy. I'm short on words. I've wanted to win this thing since I was 9 years old, when my dad used to win here, and now here I am in Victory Circle. It's just a country boy's dream comes true. Here I am.
A son finally wins on the Darlington track he saw his father best time after time.
It was hard for me to choke back the tears, you know. He could really run those tracks. And somebody said one time at the drafting, they said he could drive a damn hot dog wrapper.
The black and silver colors of the Goodwrench Chevrolet leading the way as he has all day, but Derek Cope works on him, going back into turn one for the final time. Now stretching his...
The man in black chases an elusive victory in the sport's biggest race.
Earnhardt's car blows up! Earnhardt blows a tire in turn number 3!
Derek Cope wins the Daytona 500 in a remarkable upset here at the World Center of Racing.
Just a quarter of a lap away from victory. Much you can do about it.
And after 11 full seasons and 277 winless starts, the first victory is at the biggest race of all. The soul of NASCAR is personal drama. Shared stories retold in living rooms, taverns, barbershops, and airport terminals throughout America. Without these legacies, we see only featureless knights on painted steeds jousting for position. A tough sell in the early days.
We'll be back with more exciting action from the Daytona 500 a little later on. Right now, let's switch our scenery somewhat to Wanalancet, New Hampshire, and the New England Invitational Sled Dog Race.
Okay, so NASCAR wasn't a marquee property. Not yet. But even if it had been, no network dared show the 4-hour marathons that were becoming its glamour events. In 1960, 50 technicians from CBS Sports Spectacular trundled into Daytona to try live televised racing in viewer-friendly chunks. Airing 2 qualifying races and a pair of half-hour compact car dashes staged just for television. The network considered it such a success, it ordered the crew back to New York, a full 2 weeks before the running of that year's Daytona 500.
It wasn't much of a telecast. It was almost a newsreel highlight thing, and it wasn't very good. In '61, Roone Arledge stopped by Daytona and wanted to do some Wide World of Sports NASCAR racing. And Bill said, fine, but you got to have somebody that knows something about it.
And I was the track announcer for Bill France at the Daytona Speedway. He said, well, I'll give you my guy. So now comes July 4th preparations, and you're down there, and the producer's name was Hugh Beach. And he was a typical old live producer guy who knew nothing about automobile racing. He finally calls me over and he says, you stand here, take the microphone, and you say this. And he gave me some subject matter. And I said, I'm sorry, but I can't say that. He said, my God, you've never been on television and you're a prima donna. What do you want to say? I said, well, looking at how the race is going, I feel this is in order. He said, not bad. You can say that.
The Daytona International Speedway has earned the reputation of being the world's fastest track for automobile racing. The reason for it is this 31-degree bank turn, of which there are 2, each 3,000 feet in linear length. Chris Economaki, who will be working in the pit area today, has demonstrated just how tough it is. And I guess you sort of need mountain climbing shoes, don't you, Chris?
Special shoes, Bill, definitely. Don't forget, in those days, the equipment was not nearly as portable or as light as it is today. The pit cameras were on tripods and had to be wheeled back and forth. The microphones were all hard-lined with coils of wire, and it was quite a cumbersome job working the pits.
Chris Economaki, are you near the situation down there?
Yes, we are, and it's a Mexican speed wrench, as they say in the stock car racing business, a sledgehammer being swung heavily here by Chief Mechanic Bud Moore. Joe is waiting. We'll see what Joe has to say. You're not hurt, are you?
I'm not hurt, but you ought to put that Dave Pearson in a hospital. His brain's hurt.
At Darlington, in the first Southern 500 that ABC televised, Junior stopped early, and they're changing the tires, and I stick my head in with my microphone in the car, and I said to him, what's wrong? He said, there's the tires. I said, what? He said, there's the tires. I said, what? He said, there's the tires. I still didn't know what it was. So I stood up and I said, well, it's obvious Junior's got trouble with his tires.
These are the good old days of televised racing. Tape it, ship it, splice it, voice it, air it. And everybody knew who won a week ago. Still, it wasn't as big a risk as going live. But only live TV could bring home the pivotal moment that defines a sport as Major League at last. Amici busting over from the 1 in overtime. Bird, Magic, and the 1979 NCAA championship duel that foreshadowed a decade of NBA excellence. That same year would also be NASCAR's breakthrough season, with one of the most talked about Daytona 500 finishes ever.
The number 4 corner, and the official starter, Ruby Combs, has the green flag. Down it goes, and they're underway. Putting down into the number.
I used to listen to the races 12 years old in my tent. I'd sleep in the summertime in a tent in the backyard on Church Street in Elmhurst. And I remember listening always to Darlington. The Southern 500 was the only race that really stuck my mind. And it was Curtis Turner, Joe Weatherly, and Fireball Roberts. They were the top 3 dogs. And boy, someday I wanted to go down there and meet this Fireball Roberts.
As number 28's own exploits began to take center stage, radio's Universal Racing Network began doing what television would not. Tell the story from flag to flag.
It's Southern Motor Racing Roundup. This is Bob Montgomery inviting you to stay tuned for Southern Motor Racing Roundup, the latest news about the nation's fastest growing sport.
A perfect voice in a suitcase were Bob Montgomery's calling cards. He broadcast trackside with a retired NASCAR champion from Newton, North Carolina. During his career, Ned Jarrett's easygoing charm earned him the nickname Gentleman Ned. And when he won the championship in 1961, many fans thought he was the ideal standard bearer for his sport. But if you asked him, he was all wrong.
Didn't know what to do with the championship, how to represent my sport or my family, and vowed that I would win it again and be better prepared the next time. So I took that Dale Carnegie course, and as a result, it got a lot of attention in the sport with the media that was covering the sport back then. They would seek me out for interviews because they found somebody that could talk a little bit and wanted to talk, because once you've gone through that course, I mean, you want to tell the world what you know.
On February 19th, 1979, an anxious Ned Jarrett arrived at a rain-soaked Daytona International Speedway to lend his expertise to network TV. And from his broadcast perch along pit row, he wasn't sure what this day would bring. This would be the day of CBS's live coverage of the Daytona 500, start to finish, at last. Among those taking the green flag, hard-charging Cale Yarborough and the Allisons, Donnie and Bobby. 498 miles later, the issue was still in doubt. Donnie and Cale had both worked their way back from 3 laps down to be within feet of each other, dueling for the win in a final lap shootout.
I felt like I knew where he was going to try to pass me. Strangely enough, when we started off turn 2 and I saw him go down, it surprised me a little bit.
When I pulled out to go around Donnie, going down the backstretch on the last lap, making my slingshot move on him, he just eased me right on off the racetrack.
I did not run him in the grass. We hit very hard side to side, and then when he went in the grass the last time,
I certainly tried to keep it away from Donnie, because if I could have got it straight, I still had a chance of winning the race.
You know, he was still in the throttle wide open. I was never out of the racetrack yet. I was still in pavement the whole time. And really and truthfully, at that time, I said, well, you son of a gun, when we crash up here, we both will be wide open.
Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. Thinking again. They drive into the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. They slide down to the inside. Let's watch those third-place cars. They're out of it. Petty is out in front at the line. Walter to the inside. Petty wins it. There's a fight between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison.
And he hit Bobby. Bobby's still sitting in the seat.
You know, I just felt like I was being double-teamed.
So I grabbed Cale by the arm, and I turned him around. I said, if you want to fight, I'm the one you ought to be fighting with. And believe me, Cale Yarborough to this day wish he never would have walked over and slapped Bobby.
It was live on CBS. The cameras were right on us, and they say, you know, these are real people. And I think it's one of the best things ever happened to the sport.
There was a huge blizzard, almost coast to coast that Sunday, and CBS had a captive audience.
You couldn't have scripted it any better to get people's attention as far as NASCAR Winston Cup racing is concerned.
Live television had given 16 million viewers a taste of the excitement and unpredictability of race day. The next year, technology would take these new race fans even closer to the action. The place, Australia's Bathurst 1000. Ken Squire, Chris Economaki, and John Cooper attended demonstrations. A touring car fitted with an in-car camera.
The guy ran 2 or 3 laps and was passing people, and the camera was in perfect focus and so on. And then he spun and went into an earthen embankment, not too hard. The camera followed him right in, showed that. The mud splattered all over the car. He backed it up. It's a touring car. Drove it back to the pits. And Chris and Ken and I looked at each other, and then they started backing up and showing the tape some more, and I realized neither of them were there in the room. And I walked out. It was a little room in the infield where Channel 7 was doing their work. And I walked out, and there were some phone booths over against a restroom wall. And there was old Chris in one and Ken in another, and they were calling their respective networks in New York.
Most of NASCAR's stars were concerned that the camera's weight would affect a car's competitiveness. But for one self-professed daredevil, whose personal resume included being struck by lightning and falling out of an ultralight, a few extra pounds were no big deal.
Cale Yarborough, Ken Squire, can you hear me?
Thank you very much, CBS. To this day, I have people that tell me, you know, we rode with you to Victory Lane that day, and a lot of people in this country have never forgot that first one.
If you're a child of the 60s, you can hum right along with this one. That's because tobacco ads on television were commonplace.
Find folks with a knack for having fun, and you'll find Winston.
'Cause Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
And I was in New York City one night in a hotel, and the phone rang, and Junior Johnson had tracked me down. Junior Johnson had some sort of a lead with a tobacco company, wouldn't say which one it was. It turns out it was R.J. Reynolds, to sponsor his cars. And there was some talk at the time about cigarette advertising on television being iffy. And Junior asked me on the phone if the television camera could erase the sponsorship on the car as it went by. I'll always remember that question.
1970. Chrysler has announced that its factory-backed teams will drop from 6 to 2. Ford follows suit and announces it will drop some of its teams as well. All of them, effective immediately. Years of protecting itself against the whims of Detroit will help NASCAR weather the storm. Its independently owned venues are another matter.
None of the tracks had any money. So you couldn't afford to advertise. Advertising was taking these cardboard billboards and riding whatever the well-traveled highway was between two pretty big cities and putting one up every mile or so.
Over in Ingle Hollow, North Carolina, Junior Johnson was having problems of his own. Gone 2 was his sponsor, but a half-hour's drive away was a solution.
Change to Winston.
Winston-Salem-based R.J. Reynolds had been banned from advertising its tobacco products on TV by the federal government. So Junior thought, well, they got to have a bunch of money they can't do anything with.
I approached them about sponsoring a stock car. They asked me, you know, what kind of money I was talking about, and I said, well, I need about I would think back in is about $700,000 to $800,000. And they said, Lord have mercy, we need something bigger than that. We, you know, that's, you know, nothing that we like racing and it would do us some good, but we're looking for something humongous.
And Junior says, what you need to do is call a guy named Bill France down in Daytona, Bill France Sr., and talk to him, because I think you could be a better proposition for the whole sport than just sponsoring one team.
The irony of the thing was that they had the idea of sponsoring an event. That's really what they wanted to do. They didn't really have any interest in sponsoring the series. And we talked him into that.
He said, let's be partners and make this thing grow. And rather than go out and just with a big bang with big bucks, start out gradually and let's see where we can take this sport.
I'd like to make you aware, to impress on you, what a big sport stock car racing has become in this country. For example, an estimated 80,000 people are in the stands and on the grounds today here. And as for the money involved in it, there's total prize money in this one race of $116,000.
Gives me great pleasure to present to you $1,482,338.
It is my pleasure to present you with this check for $2,300,000.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of money.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
And so began Winston Cup, a 5-year plan that's lasted nearly 3 decades. The product of a national landscape very different than today. NASCAR seems strangely frozen in the past.
The change came when RJR and Nabisco came into our sport. They knew marketing. Nobody in the sport understood marketing. And of course, they threw a lot of money at the sport. And they helped all of the speedways. They could have taken all the money they spent and bought all the speedways in the United States.
$40 million a year can do a lot if you're in the speedway business, but improved facilities need to make their turnstiles click. In 1985, Winston offered 1 million more reasons for fans to come out and see if any driver could win 3 of 4 prestigious races in a single season.
So we said, hey, let's come up with $1 million program. Sure, Jerry Long, the first year, you don't have to worry about it because, nobody's going to win. It hadn't been won but twice in the history of the sport, and so we don't have to worry about that the first year. We'll be able to ride this for a while.
But a Huck Finn lookalike from Georgia had other ideas.
He shows up at Darlington ready to potentially win $1 million, and he surrounds himself with guards. And Darrell Waltrip just takes the opportunity and jabs at him the whole time.
It was at that time and remains the greatest media craze I've ever seen at a racetrack. A lot of people absolutely would not leave the man alone. He would crawl under the race car. He works on his own race car. There was a camera or a microphone under the race car with him.
Bill Elliott is going toward immortality. Bill Elliott gets the checkered flag. Bill Elliott has won an additional $1 million in 1985.
Bill Elliott came out the first year and won it, and we didn't budget the money either.
For 12 years, no one shared Bill Elliott's throne as king of the Winston Million.
This is the last lap of the race, folks. Here he goes. Look here. Oh, they make contact. Oh, and they make contact. They go down into the corner side by side, and Jeff Gordon holds off the challenge.
Yet even as Jeff Gordon celebrated in Victory Lane, Winston was preparing to kick off NASCAR's 50th anniversary by taking its bonus fund to the next level.
This program will be known as the Winston No Bull 5. There's 5 drivers, there's 5 racetracks, and there's $5 million.
In 1972, Bill France Sr. handed the reins of NASCAR over to the most worthy successor he knew. Bill Jr. had learned his father's business from the ground up, digging ditches, parking cars, and fashioning guardrails out of palmwood. A prodigious reader, he would sit off by himself, poring over every journal and trade paper he could get his hands on. The long hours of study paid off, and Bill Jr. soon became a master negotiator of multi-million-dollar promotions, complex contractual agreements, and could even stroke a driver ego or two.
Bill Sr. had a little bit of an intimidating quality about him when he wanted to use it. He was a friendly guy, and he was not quick to anger, but he could intimidate. Bill Jr. Doesn't need to intimidate. He strategizes and wins his points that way.
Bill likes to say that he runs the show with a velvet glove. Just ask Darrell Waltrip what that means. He found himself on the pole at Pocono after Neil Bonnet had been disqualified.
About 2 weeks later, I get a call from Billy. And he says, what's your take on that deal at Pocono? He said, you think we handled it right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the man had the wrong fuel. You got the wrong fuel. You got to disqualify him, throw him out. He said, well, good. You won't mind us taking that trophy and that money back from you because you had the wrong fuel, too, which I did. I said, what? What? So he just really kind of set me up, you know.
Sure, it's a dictatorship, car owner Felix Sabates once said, but who's complaining?
He'll do a nice thing for somebody and never even acknowledge it, almost as though I'll just do that and that's that.
I can remember back to 1977, my father and I got in a car, drove to Daytona Beach, drove all night, sat out in the parking lot, went in and saw him. He gave us $1,500 to go to Talladega and race, but we didn't have the money to go.
He's so philosophical when it comes to reasoning with things and people and sponsors, and everybody can be upset about something's been changed in the rules or the system that it's going to upset the world, and you go to him and, oh, Bill, this big problem, this, that. When you come out of there, you're just really, oh, it's going to be okay, you know, 'cause just a few words of wisdom from him, just the way he expresses himself and the words that come out of his mouth that makes everything okay.
Everything he's ever told me has been gold. I mean, it's sort of like a handshake contract. If he tells you something, you know, that's what's going to happen.
He never told me, don't get on the TV and say something negative about, you know, us or NASCAR. Or, you know, he's never said that. He's been real straight up and fair. If we have a problem, let's sit and talk about it. Let's work it out the best we can and move on.
Is he does not know the word no. It's not in his vocabulary. And if he is really interested in a subject or a project and you go to him with it and, you know, he's questioning you and he's not quite sure why it isn't done yet or why we haven't made some progress, he doesn't understand the hurdles. They don't exist. And I think that really makes him a success.
When a parent hands off something to one of his children in American business, only a certain percentage of those handoffs work. And Bill France was the right man for his time. And Bill France Jr. is the right man for his time, and they're different. I think Bill France Jr. has done more for NASCAR than his father.
I'd like to thank RCA, you know, Goodyear, Ford.
STP, this is for you guys, man. They've been with Rich for 25 years. This is Todd Ford. Downey Ford ran great.
I got to thank my sponsors, Hooters Restaurant, Naturally Fresh Salad Dressings, Classic Mixers, Valvoline and Cummins and Bugles, all the McDonald's owner-operators,
Chevrolet, Southeast Wood, Owens Corning, Sylvania. Let me see. MTD.
Read the uniform. Make sure you forgot it. Make sure you didn't forget anybody.
If I missed anybody, I'm sorry.
Well, you have to remember, in the first decade of NASCAR, sponsors were virtually unheard of. There really weren't any sponsors of consequence. Some gas station would paint its name on a car for $25 or $40 for the weekend, and that was the sponsor.
That is until Carl Kiekhaefer, a Wisconsin entrepreneur who saw NASCAR as the ideal way to promote himself. He made millions with his Mercury outboard motor company and then took his fleet of logoed white Chryslers with uniform pit crews to the circuits. In 1955, they won 22 of 40 races. The following year, they took the checkered 16 straight times, a victory string unequaled to this day. His cars were constantly inspected. We were never able to find a Kiekhaefer car that was illegal, France Sr. once said. Brother, did we try. A relentless perfectionist, Kiekhaefer ordered dirt samples taken from tracks and employed a traveling meteorologist. If he watched the details like a hawk, he watched his drivers closer.
Kiekhaefer would go to Daytona and run a 60-unit motel. With his $40 million, he could do this. He'd get a room, true story, a lot of people won't believe this. Kiekhaefer would get a room in the middle, and there would be no driver be with his wife the night before a race if you drove for Carl Kiekhaefer. In other words, it was about like boxing. There was no sex for a boxer the night before he was going to box. And I think this is where Kiekhaefer got this from. And we thought it was the roughest thing in the world, you know, because we wasn't that type of athletes, you know.
That's nice. Like the intensity you feel when you drive it.
No one watches the doorknobs turning on the infield motorhomes these days. In some ways, things have gotten worse.
As soon as you step over into Winston Cup, now you've hit the big time. Not only is it big time sponsors, you know, but it's big time media and, you know, in big time dollars.
When the sponsor money started to get larger and the sponsors wanted more than their name on the side of a car, they wanted some attention paid by the driver and other people on the crew and come to their various functions and so forth, and put on a necktie when the sun goes down and kiss the car owner's wife's hand and that kind of stuff. That's when all the partying went out the door.
Now I'm in Winston Cup and you know, you don't sneeze without somebody knowing about it, but that's a part of it, you know. That's if you want to be at that level, there's certain things that you have to understand, and you know, that's one of them.
The need to be media savvy, so unique in Ned Jarrett's day some 30 years ago, is standard operating procedure now. That's because Winston's entry into NASCAR had been like a ship with a very wide wake.
We built VIP booths to bring chairmen and presidents of various companies. They were usually consumer goods companies that sold our products, that we would bring them to an event, expose them to this activity, and they would say, you know, this is a pretty good deal. This is a pretty good venue. There's a lot of people here. There's a way to expose our products here.
To me, the Tide car was a breakthrough because that gave other advertisers the confidence that it was, quote, okay to be on the side of these race cars. And today, you've got, well, it looks like a grocery store, particularly in the Busch Grand National Series. It's one grocery product after another.
And it starts by bringing a president of another company or entertaining a customer and opening the door here or opening eyes there. I mean, we have a lot of people involved in racing today that people don't realize.
On the circuit, the insiders call it the TV pen. You can get a sponsor to give you up to $1 million for it. You'll need it. In NASCAR's modern era, it costs 6 times that to field a Winston Cup team. If time is money, that's a lot of your time for their money.
I don't know how in the world a team with one driver can do any more at all than what we're doing. The only way you could probably do it if a guy was single and he had no family and didn't give a you-know-what about a family type of life. Let's just go racing and that's it.
The changing economics of racing's technology have altered the role of the driver off the track. But of the approximately 8,600 hours a year that are fair game for sponsors, it's still the 124 hours that drivers go wheel to wheel, which remains the reason why they do it.
When I get in that race car, I just feel so comfortable and feel at home when I'm in that race car. And these days, it's my getaway.
Bruton Smith always sees the world differently than you or I, especially racetracks. New ones deserve to be a cross between the Taj Mahal and a tailgate party.
Charlotte Motor Speedway did this huge expansion program and built more seats and put suites, you know, for the businesses to rent all across the top of their grandstands. And LG DeWitt came over for qualifying. And I said to LG, is that unbelievable or what? And he said, but who's he going to rent them to?
They sold out immediately, which was par for Charlotte Motor Speedway, where Bruton Smith and promoter Humpy Wheeler were always cooking up something.
Just simply putting a little Technicolor in the black and white lives that most people live. You know, I'm not curing cancer, I'm not psychoanalyzing people, I'm not running governments, I'm just entertaining race fans.
A sports editor once equated the excitement of running with the bulls to that of auto racing. If that's true, then with his craziest idea, Bruton Smith could have both thrills. Run with the bulls of Wall Street by taking the stocks to the stocks.
Public ownership of major speedways has been very important from the standpoint of providing the capital to be able to go forward and spend the type of money required to build the finest stadiums in North America. There's no question, if you look at Speedway Motorsports, the capital that Bruton Smith raised through his public offering enhanced Atlanta, Charlotte, obviously his track in Texas.
It's kind of like you're climbing out in the jet and you have the afterburners, you turn those on, you know, but that's what it's done to the sport, because it opened the doors of all the financial markets. Our sport is now discussed in the boardrooms. I think all your Fortune 500 companies are looking at us. A great number of them are involved in our sport, so that has created an unbelievable growth.
Texas Motor Speedway. This is the cha-ching that comes from $140 million in public offerings. And this is how you keep the investors happy. It'll cost you $500,000 to put your company's logo on one of 7 elevator towers. 70 grand more than that will get you the best condo outside the southeast turn. You want to watch the race on TV? It costs the network $4 million. But it's hard to argue with success. A $4.5 million purse will reward the men who put their lives on the line. And with 3 million more fans buying Winston Cup tickets than a decade before, even the little guy keeps up with the Dow Jones.
The exciting thing is the new racetracks, and then the old racetracks looking new. I mean, you know, you look at a Bristol Motor Speedway, this place is just unbelievable. I mean, you know, a half-mile racetrack holding over 100,000 people. That's exciting. I mean, that's something that is going to continue the growth.
How much can it grow? Bruton Smith added 6,000 new seats at Bristol during the off-season. There were 320,000 requests. Groundbreaking has taken place for a new super track in Kansas City and will be completed in the year 2000. Put millions down and wait for a date. That's because even now there are only so many NASCAR Winston Cup races to go around.
People do anything to get a Winston Cup race, including buying at North Wilkesboro and you know, shutting it down and taking the 2 Winston Cup dates, and really showing no remorse doing it. Just, you know, they need the date, they'll take it anywhere they can.
Who bought North Wilkesboro Speedway and shut its gates after 50 years of racing? A partnership between Bob Baer and Bruton Smith. One of the Winston Cup dates went to Texas Motor Speedway.
You look around old football stadiums, a lot of them have bit the dirt. A lot of Major League Baseball stadiums have bit the dirt. They tear them down and they go back and they do it somewhere else. That's inevitable.
Now, 13 of 19 Winston Cup tracks have gone public, including those owned by Bill France's International Speedway Corporation. Perhaps it is inevitable, as Bruton Smith says, that the sport outgrow privately owned family tracks in favor of the multiple speedway conglomerates. But what happened at North Wilkesboro remains a powerful reminder that sometimes the price of moving forward is paid in memories. NASCAR's mainstream celebrity status, so familiar to us now, is actually the end result of a 20-year effort by NASCAR to reshape its red clay image, reaching out to hometown America with an awareness of the symbolic it had not shown before. During 1973's energy crisis, Bill France Jr. cut practice sessions 15%. His new chief consultant lobbied to cut race distances another 10.
I thought that was the wrong way to go. Turned out he was 100% right and I was dead wrong. And his analogy was, he says, we've got to show the non-racing person that we're making a sacrifice, which we were.
Taking a more visible approach on the world stage brought with it a funny make-it-up-as-you-go-along protocol. The day Andy Granatelli brought King Hussein to meet Bill Sr. at Daytona with preparations fit for a, well, you know.
Secret Service said you can't have anyone else in the suite when the King's in there. So Bill sent me up to the suite to notify people as they arrived that they couldn't come in.
An early attempt by NASCAR to control its own media image created today's highly successful, nationally syndicated motor racing radio network.
The Motor Racing Network started a television production and bicycled the tapes around for delayed one-hour shows. We told ESPN, we've been doing this for 3 years and we really don't want to be in the TV business. And
the philosophy of the network is not to just follow the leader around the track. There are all kinds of great battles going on, and if you're a fan watching the race at the track, you have the wherewithal to look anywhere you want and watch any battle you want.
We are not following the leader of the race. We are focused in on Alan Kulwicki, who is going to win the 1992 NASCAR Winston Cup and the $1 million bonus that goes with it.
The new broadcast philosophy produced its share of the bizarre as well. But when you have 5 hours to fill each Sunday, anything goes.
We get on the air, and all of a sudden, the chief spotter, John Sineff, tells Terry Ligner, the producer, that the pace car has been stolen. And he goes, no, I know you're joking with me. There's no way that could happen. And at that time, I was listening in at the same time, and we zoomed in on the cameras to the pace car, and sure enough, here's a guy with no shirt on, long hair, and he certainly wasn't the pace car driver.
In gasoline alleys across America, NASCAR's now constant electronic companion was looked upon with trepidation. After all, threading a needle with a ton of metal hurtling 200 feet in a heartbeat can get to be second nature. Staring into a little 3-inch lens would take a new breed of driver. Someone with nearly superhuman boldness.
Is this going all over the world, all over the country?
When that red light came on, man, I went to work. I got my message out. I'm gonna tell you what, folks. Saturday night, Cuckoo Marlin is dog meat. He'll never work in this town again. He's out of here. The kid has come to town. I'm gonna blow him off the racetrack. He'll quit racing when I get through with him. And so that was the way it was every Saturday morning before the race on Saturday night. Well, it created a lot of excitement.
When I grew up, I couldn't do anything. I mean, I couldn't get up in front of 2 or 3 people and say 2 words. And this has really changed me in a lot of ways. And I still don't understand some of that side of it. You know, a special thanks to all the Bill Elliott fans out there that's really supported me over the last number of years. I can't say enough about those folks, and just the NASCAR fans in general. You know, you go to these racetracks early in the morning, 7 o'clock, it can be 20 degrees, and there's fans sitting in the grandstands. And I think my hat's off to all those guys, because I don't know that I could do that. But, you know, for them to support us the way they do is absolutely amazing to me.
Amazing? Yes. But it is here in this mini UN where allegiances are expressed in numbers that the true success of NASCAR lies.
In all of our policies, we try to tilt our ticket sales, our presence on the facility, heavily in favor of Mr. and Mrs. Fan. If you think about that, the corporate sponsors only want to be here because the fans are here.
Fans are 50% of the horsepower. That makes a big thing. Before a race, when they cheer you, that's half of it. Fans are what make the horsepower in your mind. The louder the cheer, the faster you can get.
The 50 has been brought to you by 76 NASCAR High Performance Motor Oil. Works for NASCAR, works for your car. By your select GM Goodwrench Service Plus dealers, the plus means better. And by Coca-Cola Classic. Always the real thing. Always Coca-Cola.
This is International Speedway Boulevard, Daytona Beach. And this is Park Avenue, New York, the Waldorf Astoria. At one time, the distance between the two seemed several cultures wide.
It was too uptown. I said, well, you know, we don't belong in this place. It's just, we was outclassed, but everybody come in, fit in, and NASCAR, you know, they knew what they was doing. They always do.
Part of the rap we were finding was, well, it's a southeastern sport. We'll do some regional advertising, but I'm not sure we want to do national advertising. The move to New York give us a little more of that national flavor. You know, today, the NASCAR Winston Cup Banquet probably has the largest gathering of corporate CEOs of any function in the country.
That's NASCAR's job, to make sure that we create opportunities and create a direction with the sport where everybody can win.
And it's the greatest time that there's ever been to be in racing, in motorsports, because this sport is just thriving and it's growing and there's no end to it.
Everyone in America, and I think pretty much throughout the world, will know about our 50th year. It's going to promote motorsports like never before. We've got a great group of people working on it, both corporate and from the media standpoint. Great partners tonight with our former champions here. Let's show them the logo.
In 1904, a man by the name of McIntosh considered the prospect of horseless carriages going head-to-head and wrote, "Let us guard this great, big, far-reaching sport in its infancy so that it may develop into a being which shall be a constant source of delight, pride, and satisfaction to us all." Today, Bill France Jr.'s NASCAR is that source of delight and a $2 billion a year industry. Not a bad start for the pioneers who met 50 years ago at the Streamline Hotel. And the Iron Men who raced the beach sands and red Carolina clay for little money and only tomorrow's promise that another racetrack lay just around the bend.